Mulan will be pushed back, but The Hunt is certainly being pushed back and shelved for foreseeable future. As after the El Paso and Dayton shootings earlier in August, they decided that they're not going to be releasing this movie, starring Betty Gilpin,
Yeah.
Glow fame, and Hilary Swank from Million Dollar Baby
Lots of
fame,
stuff.
and lots of other things. Also, I didn't know that. Yeah, and this is written by Damon Lindelof, which I didn't know.
Co-writer, yeah. Emma
cool.
Roberts also in it.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Well, when I first heard this, I thought, man, that makes sense. But as I've sat with this for the last couple of weeks, I kind of been going back and forth with, is this a good precedent to set for artistic properties and movies in general, that real world events can so heavily impact what people decide to put out? And I'm wondering where you're falling in terms of how are you feeling about this news in general, but then more the idea of like, should these real world events be influencing what movies and what kind of stories are being told?
Right. And it's important to note that initially Universal pulled a lot of the advertisements and marketing for The Hunt. Mm-hmm. But then once Trump tweeted, he didn't name the movie, but he blamed the film and Hollywood overall for the cause of gun violence in the country. The next day, The Hunt was completely pulled off the calendar. And they haven't said it's shelved permanently, but as of right now, we don't know if we'll ever see it. It'll see the light of day. And this is not the first time that like ads have been pulled or stuff, but it just kind of came at a bad time where, remember, blaming video games for gun violence was back in the news, right? And then blaming Hollywood. These are two things that are not old ideas, but are constantly picked apart and shut down by anyone with a brain. And then to immediately kind of bow down to the whims of Trump, and whether he believes that or not doesn't matter, but that's the message you're sending, right?
Right.
And it kind of harkens back to, remember The Interview, Seth Rogen and Franco?
Yep.
Movie about North Korea going to kill Kim Jong-un. And that movie was pulled from theater distribution completely due to like bomb threats, vague terror threats. And whether there was any credence to that, I can understand the theater chains deciding to not risk it, right? Mm-hmm. That's fine. And we still got a VOD release, and it frankly marketed the movie pretty well, quite well in the end. But for The Hunt, it's not like nothing else violent came out recently. We just got Angel Has Fallen, right? Mm-hmm. A movie that deals with stereotypical Middle Eastern villains and brazen gun violence from Gerard Butler, right? And it's not like we haven't had violence against civilians that might be politically motivated. This movie's co-produced by Blumhouse and Jason Blum. How many Purge movies have we seen so far?
Right.
I don't seem to care about those, right? Mm-hmm. So, as you were saying, I think the precedent for this is just really stupid. And, the movie does sound a bit inflammatory. Apparently, it might have at one point been called Red State versus Blue State. The whole concept, of course, is that these elitist, globalist folks are rounding up deplorables to go hunt and kill them, right? Basically, a remake of The Most Dangerous Game from the 20th century, but with a clear contemporary U.S. spin on it. Mm-hmm. But why don't you let the audience determine if the satire works or not? Let them decide if the movie is worth all the hubbub. But to just completely not put the movie out at all because you're worried about the backlash, it's just a weak move from Universal, in my opinion.
Yeah, I felt like it's easy to be reactionary around these sort of issues. You talk about how influential things can be, and certainly, like you said, video games are not to blame for gun violence. Mental health is not to blame for gun violence. There's a lot more that goes into it than just someone watching something and deciding, oh, that sounds like a good idea, I want to go do that. Certainly, people can see things sometimes, and it can make them uh, think, oh, I want to look further into this, or I want to maybe learn more about this, but it doesn't actually mean that they're going to go do it. Where I feel really, I think, frustrated about this situation is, uh, like you said, this was a movie that was probably going to be inflammatory because it was written to look at both perspectives on the issue, and it was probably going to leave a lot of people feeling one way or the other, like their perspective either wasn't represented correctly, or potentially what they didn't like seeing the other perspective represented the way it was going to be, because people, I think, oftentimes are living in this bubble where they don't want to challenge their perspectives, but more want, that a confirmation bias. Um, but without giving the audience or anybody a chance to do that, we're just left here with this possibility and having this argument over something we don't know about.
Right.
Now,
no one's seen it at all.
I think potentially the ads could have been altered or just done differently, because even watching the trailers for it, it looks like a violent trailer. It looks like a violent movie. The ads were this like warning coming on, like there's an emergency service thing. So it kind of puts you in this sense of like insecurity or vulnerability or fear. And that potentially could have been changed to try to reduce that immediate impact. And the release had been pushed back to October already. So kind of like the Mulan thing, I think there's an opportunity to the gun debate has been raging for years and years now in America, but let the immediacy of the tragedies in El Paso and Dayton die down, and then to release this with a different spin in the trailer, so to speak.
Right. It's important to note, too, that a piece was written in the National Review that described the whole concept of the movie as something that's pro-Trump and anti-progressive. So I think really for anyone to declaratively say what the message of the movie is, whose side it's supporting, if it's satire at all, like we said, no one's seen it. So we'll put the movie out and determine that on our own. And if you want to wait a little bit, maybe not directly advertise it until there's some distance with the shootings, that's one thing. But I really hope we do see it at some point, even if it's just a VOD release.